like a bloody mess. Like, we'll get to a part that has some blood in it, but a lot of this, remember we said that outer layer is incredibly thick? If I start trying to peel this off by hand, notice it's clear. Like, there's not a lot of blood in that. That's part of the reason why, if you did have like an issue with this, it doesn't heal like overnight. Kind of like a sprained ankle doesn't heal super quick because you're dealing with like tendons or ligaments possibly. So that's part of that connective tissue. So if we try and cut off, this is a tube called the vas deferens. That's where sperm would end up like going inside and then like coming out to see the light of day. So we'll cut through that. That's the part that's going to be a little bit bloodier, just in that it has more blood flow going to it.
You almost got your finger there.
No. And remember, this thing is like super sharp. And you can kind of see like how much I'm having to cut through this. It's very, very thick tissue.
So that's how long it takes you? Okay. Oh, come on.
So that's this part would be a little bit bloodier. But anything like that, that's going to be fat, where it's kind of that yellowy color.
Yellow?
Fat is yellow, yes.
Okay.
So try and cut into this without slicing too deeply, so we can just look at the layer. The other thing that's nice about this, and on females up top, is it's one of the rare areas in your body that you can detect cancer before a doctor could. So testicular cancer, semi-common in males. Breast cancer, pretty common in females. If you have liver cancer, pretty hard to detect that because it's inside, you can't feel it, you have to have testing done. Something like this, they'll tell people to do self-checks because you could actually feel like a hard tumor. It should have, this is kind of the consistency of maybe like a grape that's a little bit past ripe. So it's not super hard.
A little bit past right.
But if you had a cancer or a tumor in there, it'd be like rock hard. Kind of like your arm, you ought to be a little bit squishy. But if you had something that felt like a rock in there, you probably ought to go to the doctor. So if you notice, if I can get this part off, this is that connective tissue that is really tough. And if you try and just like pull this apart,
On your finger?
it's pretty difficult
A little gold.
to tear. Like, it's incredibly thick. So when you hear like that MMA guy that had a ruptured testicle, you have to have tremendous force to like rupture one of these. Rupturing just means this part has been torn. It's kind of like an ACL. Not easy to break one of those, but you hear people that snap those every once in a while. So that's incredibly thick. Not a lot of blood flow going to that. And that's kind of very tough layer. Now, this tube over here is that vas deferens. So that's the part there that sperm would come out of the side and then basically go down this tube. So if you've heard of somebody getting fixed, like in animals, they cut this, take the whole thing out like we got here. If you hear of like a human that gets fixed, they cut this tube, leave that in there so it's making testosterone. But if that tube gets severed, sperm cannot get out then. So if we cut into this now, notice we have like multiple layers of that connective tissue. And we're finally getting to the internal part. Now, we cannot see the individual tubes because they're microscopic, but see how it looks a little stringy?
Yeah.
Almost kind of like string cheese. If you could see under a microscope,
Shut up! My God.
those would all be individual tubes that are going back and forth. And again, some places will eat these. You've heard of like Rocky Mountain oysters. They'll take this, basically stick it in egg batter, like put the thing like in breading and fry it. This is like 100% fat. Other than your liver, ovaries and testicles have the highest fat of anywhere in your body. You might remember endoplasmic reticulum from last year in cells. It's like 100% in these cells. So this stuff. It's almost like a grape, but the skin of the grape is ridiculously tough. You end up with that, which are all connected tubes, and then this is also part. It's amazing how thick this stuff is. Like, obviously it's slippery, but I have a difficult time actually tearing this without using a scalpel because it's so, right, like that's super thick stuff.
You can hear it.
Yeah,
Trying.
like yeah,
It's like stretching.
and that's that tube.
Oh, right there?
Yeah.
You said it was like microscopic.
Well,
No,
this
that's
is
the-
this is vas deferens.
Oh, okay.
So that tube is part of the connective tissue that's in this. But
What the heck?
yeah.
Okay.
So I'll just leave that there.
Coolio.